This week on Making Contact.
One of the biggest reasons that we have
All right. Hey, Kenzie. I am here. Now I got to see what's going on.
Firing up the rocket for the Artemis moon missions, a nomination for NASA's next administrator, and making room for the space stories to tell you about this week at NASA. On March 18th, we conducted the second Green Run Series hot fire test with the core stage for our Space Launch System, or SLS rocket, at our Stennis Space Center near Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. All 4 of the rocket's RS-25 engines were fired at the same time during the test to simulate the core stage's operation for a launch, during which it will generate about 1.6 million pounds of thrust.
This is a major milestone in advancing our goals and objectives for Artemis. And I just could not be more proud of the team, of their talent, dedication, getting to this point and pulling off a just very successful test.
The hot fire is the final test of the Green Run series to ensure the rocket's core stage is ready to launch Artemis missions, beginning with Artemis 1, the first uncrewed mission of SLS and our Orion spacecraft around the moon and back. On March 19th, Acting NASA Administrator Steve Jerzik released a statement in response to President Joe Biden's nomination of Bill Nelson to serve as the 14th NASA Administrator. The statement noted Nelson's proven history of supporting our wide-ranging work here at NASA. Jerzik went on to say that while the nomination must still be confirmed, he looks forward to continued work with Nelson and the Biden-Harris administration to carry out NASA's many critical missions in the future. In 1986, while the chair of the House Space Subcommittee, Nelson flew aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia as a payload specialist on the STS-61C mission. On March 19th, 3 members of the International Space Station's Expedition 64 crew, including our Kate Rubins, undocked and moved a Soyuz spacecraft from the station's Razvet module to a different docking port. The relocation will allow the next Soyuz crew, which includes our Mark Vande Hei, to dock to Razvet when they arrive on April 9th. Each March, many of us look forward to following our tournament brackets, and it's that time of year again to make your winning picks for Tournament Earth. From now through April 13th, you can cast votes for the most unforgettable photographs of Earth taken by astronauts from the International Space Station for more than 20 years. For more details, to download your bracket and to vote, go to earthobservatory.nasa.gov/TE. 27 asteroids have been named in honor of African American, Hispanic, and Native American astronauts and 1 cosmonaut for their contributions to space exploration and for inspiring the next generation of explorers. The people who inspired the newly named asteroids include NASA's Stephanie Wilson, who is on our Artemis team of astronauts, one of whom will be the first woman to set foot on the moon, and former NASA astronauts Jose Hernandez, who worked as part of a migrant farming family in his youth, and John Harrington, a member of the Chickasaw Nation. Near-Earth asteroid 2001 FO32 is expected to make its closest approach to us on March 21st. The asteroid is the largest predicted to pass by Earth this year and is expected to safely pass no closer than 1.25 million miles from Earth, which is about 5.25 times the distance from Earth to the Moon. The close approach will give astronomers a valuable scientific opportunity to study the asteroid. New results from our Juno mission have for the first time revealed that Jupiter's dawn storms are born on the planet's night side, which Juno can see because it orbits over the planet's poles. Dawn storms are intense early morning brightening of aurorae that occurs at both Jovian poles. These are specific to Jupiter, but researchers say they are very similar to a type of terrestrial aurora called substorms. The findings could provide a better understanding about how these planetary phenomena occur on worlds both within and beyond our solar system. That's what's up this week at NASA. For more on these and other stories, follow us on the web at nasa.gov/twan.
The Electoral College, and this is not what you were told in 8th grade, but I promise you it's true, is slavery.
Who are the electors, anyway? And will the United States ever join the rest of the world and adopt a popular vote for president? Yale University law and political science professor Akil Reed Amar says the Electoral College discourages voting, lessens the power of the states, and could work to the disadvantage of either major political party.
Whether a few Ohioans vote or a lot of Ohioans vote, Ohio is still going to get the same number of electoral votes and still be the swing states.
On this edition, Professor Akil Reed Amar speaks with Angela McKenzie of Initiative Radio about how the U.S. Constitution can be changed to create a more fair and just society. I'm Andrew Stelzer, and this is Making Contact, a program connecting people, vital ideas, and important information.
Today I'd like to talk a little about the Electoral College. To start, I'm going to cite some items that I pulled from the Office of the Federal Register. That's the office that helps states organize their electors and, in the end, certifies and archives the results of the Electoral College votes. So here's the first item. In each state, the voters choose electors to select the President and Vice President of the United States based on the results of the November general election. Now, there are two things here that could be a little disturbing. The first is the voters choose electors to select the President and Vice President. So I don't think the average American voter believes that when they step into the booth on election night, they're choosing members of the Electoral College, nor could they tell you who these people are. So would you please tell me who the electors are, why we choose them, and does an average Josephine like me stand a chance to be an elector one day?
An average Josephine absolutely can be an elector because, in fact, the only people who can't be electors are the regular politicians, the members of the House and the Senate, and so on. The way an average Josephine gets to be an elector is by getting her political party and basically to name her on a slate, by basically being a good party person. Generally pretty obscure people that have been picked by the candidates, by the parties, to basically be loyal to them. Now, why do we have this system? Not for the reason that you were told in 3rd grade or 8th grade or college. You were probably told, oh, it's a balance between big and small states. But if so, how come the big state guy always wins? We've had 3 small state presidents in all of American history: Bill Clinton, Franklin Pierce, and Zachary Taylor. For 32 of the first 36 years of the presidency, it's a Virginian. That's the biggest state. For the other 4, it's a Massachusetts guy. That's the 2nd or 3rd biggest state, depending on you count. For the next 4 years after that, another Massachusetts guy. So it's not big state, small state. We were told also in 8th grade, oh, we have electors because the framers didn't really believe in direct democracy. But they put the Constitution. Constitution itself to a vote. They believe that the House of Representatives should be directly elected, even though Congress under the Articles of Confederation, the earlier document, wasn't directly elected. They believed in direct election of governors, so that's not quite it. One of the biggest reasons that we have the Electoral College, and this is not what you were told in 8th grade, but I promise you it's true, is slavery. Because 225 years ago, if you just had direct popular vote, the South would have gotten outvoted every time because it doesn't let its black population, who are slaves largely, vote. So the Electoral College basically meant that Virginia would get to count its slaves, albeit with a 3/5 discount, but the southern states would get some partial credit for their slave populations. Who's the big winner in this system? Big southern states with lots of slaves, in particular Virginia. Remember, again, for 32 of the first 36 years of the new Constitution, the presidency is held by a slaveholding Virginian. In 1800, Pennsylvania has more free people than Virginia, way more voters than Virginia because it lets a larger proportion of its free population vote. But who has more electoral votes? Virginia does, more than Pennsylvania, because Virginia has a lot of slaves that it gets to count as 3/5. So we have the Electoral College largely for reasons of slavery. If this wasn't overwhelmingly obvious to everyone when the Constitution was adopted, and perhaps it wasn't, it became overwhelmingly obvious when we had two races, as soon as Washington left the scene, between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. And Adams won the first time, and Jefferson won the second time, and it's a Southerner, Jefferson, against a Northerner, Adams, and the races both times, they're not big state against small state, it's North against South. And Jefferson wins the South, and Adams wins the North, and in the second time around, Jefferson wins because he gets the swing state, which wasn't Ohio yet, it was New York. That was the swing state at the time, where North met South, which was a slave state at the time. And every person who voted for Adams understood that without the extra electoral votes created by slavery that Thomas Jefferson won because he wins the South, John Adams would have actually won that second election in 1800. So by 1800, it is obvious to everyone in America who's paying any attention that the Electoral College has a huge benefit for Southern slaveholding populations, for the slave masters.
Next, the electors select the president and vice president. Sounds a little strange. Does the common man and woman's vote count in this day and age? Is it legally relevant, or is it kind of like an exercise that's akin to choosing the next American Idol?
It matters a lot within each state. We don't add up voters in different states. We put them, in effect, in 51 separate buckets. 51 because D.C. also participates. Within each bucket, yes, your vote is hugely important because whoever gets more votes in that bucket wins the Electoral College from that state. There are a couple of wrinkles in Nebraska and Maine. Let me put those to one side. But in general, whoever wins more votes in a given state wins all of that state's electoral votes. And so your vote definitely does count in New York, in Connecticut, in California. And by the way, even if it didn't make a difference, and it's very unlikely that any one voter is going to make a difference, you have an obligation to vote. People died for this. Around the world, they don't have this right. This is not just your right, but your duty, and I'll lay one other trip on you. You have an obligation to bone up on the issues before you vote. This happens only once every 4 years. You should devote to it the kind of attention you would to any important decision in your life, whether to take a new job, whether to marry a certain person, whether to have children. There are decisions in your life that you take seriously. This is a decision about the life of the Republic, and you have an obligation to take it seriously.
But I'm pretty sure I read that even if one candidate got the majority of the votes and the Electoral College is supposed to award the electoral vote to him or her, the electors could change their minds and go the other way. They don't have to.
This is what's called the issue of the faithless elector, the elector who seems to promise that they're going to vote for candidate X, and you vote for them because you favor candidate X, and then they pull a switcheroo on you when they actually meet 3 weeks after Election Day. And this is theoretically possible. It's unlikely to happen because the candidates have themselves picked the electors. There's at least one situation in which we might want them to do that. Suppose after Election Day, lightning hit one of the candidates and they went into a coma or something. It's a theoretical possibility, this idea of a faithless elector. We really haven't seen it in any way that could possibly affect the outcome in the modern era. But it's one of many glitches in our system, many. We could have an electoral college tie. There are all sorts of things that could happen. I'm in favor of direct popular election. And in the book, in fact, I explain how we could do that without even needing to formally amend the Constitution. I show you ways of getting to direct national election. And by the way, that's an American idea, that idea of direct election, and here's how I can prove it. Because we have 51 American constitutions, the federal constitution and 50 state constitutions. And in every state, there's a written constitution, and it looks a lot like the federal constitution, and it has a legislature, an executive, a judiciary, a bill of rights, and so on. And it has a chief executive in every state who looks a lot like a president. 4-year terms in almost every state, a veto pen, a pardon pen, and in no state do we pick that person, that mini president, whom we call a governor. In no state do we pick that person with an electoral college-like system. We vote for that person. Whoever gets the most votes wins. If it's close, we recount carefully. That's how we do it in New York and California and Pennsylvania and everywhere else, and that's how we could do it nationally and should.
In what chapter of America's Unwritten Constitution can we find this brilliant idea, Professor Amar?
That idea is in the last chapter, which is called America's Unfinished Constitution. The Constitution has been amended many times. And God bless these amendments. Without these amendments, women wouldn't be voters. African Americans wouldn't have a constitutional right to vote. I wouldn't be guaranteed a citizenship by dint of the mere fact that I'm born in the United States, even though my parents weren't citizens when I'm born. So these amendments made amends for some of the lapses, some of the sins, if you will, the original sins of the Founding Fathers, and we're not done. Just as the Reconstruction Americans made the system better in the Progressive era, we had women's suffrage. In my lifetime, we got the 18-year-old vote, and we prohibited poll tax disfranchisement. This new generation could add still additional thoughts, principles, amendments to the Constitution. And in the last chapter, I talk about how that might happen. And one of the proposals I put forth is direct election of the president. And here's why I do. I actually say in the last chapter, I can tell you what the amendments of the future are likely to look like. One, they're likely to look like things that states have road tested first. States are laboratories of experimentation. So we have Romney Care first, and then we nationalize it with Obamacare. And that's true not just of health care, but a lot of things in the Constitution. States had written constitutions first, then the federal Constitution followed it. States had 3 branches of government, then the federal Constitution followed it. States had bills of rights, many of them, so we get a federal Bill of Rights. Some states got rid of slavery, we continentalized that. States let women vote, many of them, before the federal Constitution did that. So what did I say before? I say states pick governors by direct election, so that's one reason why the idea of picking a president by direct election looks eminently American and sensible. Another thing that I talk about is how, in general, our constitutional amendments are going to need to be supported by both political parties.
America's Unfinished Constitution. Somehow that seems like a segue into another book, possibly with collaborators. What do you think of that?
Well, my collaborators are called the American people. And in fact, I end by inviting people across the world to participate in this conversation. The American Constitution was adopted 225 years ago by putting the thing to a vote up and down the continent. And in that vote, a lot of people who were allowed to participate in how they and their posterity were to be governed brought new ideas to the table. For example, they said, well, we like this Philadelphia proposal, but where are the rights? You forgot the rights. So in that national conversation about ratifying the Constitution, the idea